So, welcome to the second section of our webinar series done by The Living Earth, a sustainable and responsible tourism venture for biodiversity conservation and climate change. Today we have Nitya Prakash Mohanty, my close friend from Wildlife. I met him in my Wildlife Institute of India days. So his passion for the island started from our third semester itself. So Nitya is a trained ecologist. He did his doctorate in invasion biology, and currently he is doing his post-doctoral research from Indian Institute of Science. He worked in tropical islands of Andaman archipelago for 6 years, documenting the natural history of many reptiles, including sleeping behavior. So today he will be taking us to the world of lizards, especially introduce us on a beautiful topic called ecology of lizards. Nitya, it's up to you now. Ritesh, can you share the first thing with me?
Thank you for having me here. And thank you, Subish, for this opportunity. So I would like to share my work with you, my current research on sleep ecology of lizards. But before we get to that, let me walk you through some basics of sleep. Right. So what is sleep? It seems like a dumb question, but it is not. The answer is not that straightforward. Uh, so we experience sleep for about one third of our lifetimes, 8 hours. I sleep 8 hours a day without fail. So sleep behaviorally, uh, scientists have defined it with a few criteria. So we have license of activity. So we animals don't engage in, say, locomotion or feeding or any of these things during sleep. So they're quiet, right? And there is an increased arousal threshold. So what that means basically is that to wake you up or to wake an animal up, you would need a higher stimulus, be it sound, be it touch, be it vibration, uh, which is higher than you would need to make it active when it is awake. So your alarm clock knows it too well that, if your alarm goes off when you're awake as compared to when you're asleep, your reaction time changes, right? So that in essence is an increased arousal threshold that characterizes sleep. And but once you're stimulated enough, something disturbs you enough, then you wake up. Yeah, there is rapid reversibility to wakefulness, and in most species there is a typical sleep posture. I will show you with some lizards, but yeah, in most species it is quite typical how they sleep, the posture, and ultimately sleep is homeostatically regulated. Now, it has nothing to do with homeopathy. It's homeostatically regulated basically means that if there is loss of sleep, it is it is compensated for. This is called a sleep debt. When you say study a lot for exams or you party too hard and you lose out on a few hours of sleep, the next day or the day after that, you have to compensate for that in some ways. If you sleep, say, 2 hours one night, the next night you would likely to sleep a bit more than your usual duration. So that is called homeostasis. Homeostasis. It is the body maintains it at a certain level. Right. And sleep occurs throughout the animal kingdom. We obviously know that a lot of vertebrates sleep, like lions, elephants. Obviously, these guys sleep. But what many people don't appreciate is that even insects sleep, jellyfishes sleep, and this has been observed throughout the animal kingdom. So sleep seems to be quite ancient in origin. And as you can see on the right, you have birds, mammals, reptiles, amphibians, all displaying some sort of sleep behavior. And apart from the 4 or 5 behavioral characteristics, as I said, that sleep is associated with, say, quiescence and increased stimulus for arousal, it also has electrophysiological signals. And I'm telling you all this to give you a brief background. and then we get into the interesting stuff, right? But sleep is just not sleep. So it's not that you close your eyes and you are inactive and that's it. No, sleep is a very complex state. And when you sleep, there are many complex things going on in your body and in other animals' body. So scientists record these processes by electrophysiology. So there is EEG, which is electroencephalogram, which is a reading of your brain waves. There is electromyogram, which is a reading of your muscle tone. There is electroencephalogram, which is reading of your eye movements. And there is electrocardiogram, that is your heart rate. So we use all these measures to characterize sleep. And based on these measures, your brain waves, your muscle tone, scientists have found that sleep is not just sleep, it is actually two different states. One is quiet sleep or slow wave sleep, and the other is active sleep or rapid eye movement sleep. And in some conditions, there is a special case when there is unihemispheric sleep, where one part of your brain goes to sleep, one hemisphere goes to sleep while the other is awake. And this happens in many marine mammals like whales. And what that essentially does is they're active and sleeping at the same time. So these examples just show that sleep is not just a simple activity, right? So let me just show you how these EEGs and EMGs look when you're awake and when you're in REM sleep or non-REM sleep. So if you can see the screen, when you're awake, if you're a lab mouse, which has been experimented upon, then you would see that the brainwave, it's quite frequent. The EMG, the muscle tone is also quite steady. But when you go into slow wave sleep or non-REM sleep, there's like really deep amplitude, low frequency signals in your brain, and your muscle tone is reduced. It's not completely gone. But when you go into this state of REM sleep or rapid eye movement sleep, apart from your eyes moving rapidly, and this happens to you, it happens to dogs, it happens to a lot of organisms. They go into this state of sleep where their eyes are moving behind closed eyelids, and there is very active braves, but the muscle tone is completely gone. So this is to show that there are different states of sleep which are different when you're awake, and it changes, like your brain changes, your muscle tone changes, your heart rate goes down, your eye movements come down, and so on. So, but why sleep? You know, animals and humans have a lot of important things to do. We have to feed, we have to mate, we have to move. But if all these important activities are there, why should any animal sleep? But the sleep has been shown to have the restorative functions. It restores your neurons. It has memory consolidating functions. So you remember better if you have a good night's sleep. And if you don't sleep, it affects your performance in the next day. So sleep function has been studied a lot, and we know it has energy conservation, restoration, all these functions, right? But what I'm interested in as an ecologist, as someone who studies the natural world, what I'm most interested in is how does the environment influence sleep? So what do I mean by the environment? The environment is not just rain and wind and temperature fluctuation. It also comes with predation from anything that can eat you, from competition from your own species or other species. You have this challenge of thermoregulation. So for example, in ectotherms that can't regulate their own body temperature. We can regulate our body temperature at 37 degrees, right? Celsius. But many lizards, all reptiles and amphibians, they can't. So what happens to them is that they have to match the environment and thermoregulate or bask, as we know the behaviors, to regulate their body temperature, right? So how do these things influence sleep? So sleep, there is this very strong idea in literature that sleep is a vulnerable state, right? When you're sleeping, you're not aware of your surroundings. And what that means is that you're more easily eatable. Somebody can attack you and get you. A deer, when it is active, it can run away. But when it is sleeping, and if it doesn't detect the tiger approaching, then it's definitely vulnerable to being eaten. So all animals, in essence, must guard against that. And I'll show you with examples how that works. Right. And what I'm also interested in is, apart from these things happening in the wild, how does human action change these things? We all know that there is artificial light at night is a big problem globally. All our cities are lit up, all our houses are lit up. And what that does is alter the sleep cycle in many animals. Animals and sleep in animals evolved under the light and dark cycle, right? There's daylight from sunrise to sunset, and there is a fixed amount of time that is dark. Obviously, it changes with moonlight a bit, but overall, this rhythm of light and dark, this cycle over millenniums, has actually shaped our sleep duration, when we sleep, how long we sleep, and so on. But when we have such intense white light at night all across our environment, it can affect sleep. And when biological invasions happen, that is, species are taken away from their natural range into a novel environment beyond their natural range, what happens to sleep then? They don't know they're not accustomed to that area, and so on. So I'm interested in these kind of things, and I'm particularly interested in not only when and how much organisms sleep. I'm also interested in where they sleep and how they sleep. And to us, where we sleep may seem very trivial, but if you notice, we sleep inside a house. We try not to sleep in the roads, right? So we try to sleep in the safety of our house. The door is locked. We ensure that. We generally try to sleep on bed. So we both protect us from predators. So we don't even like to sleep, say, on the ground close to, say, where there can be snakes in, say, villages. We try to be thermally stable or comfortable enough, so warm enough when we sleep, right? And yeah, so we also we are very careful about where we sleep. Our sleep site selection is important to us. But this also happens with animals. And a lot of literature, especially in monkeys, focuses on where they sleep. And I'll show you how and why this is actually important to not only how they live, but to their conservation as well. And through this talk, I know a lot of tourism happens in India, especially for tigers and big mammals, right? But through this talk, I'll show you how fascinating something as simple and tiny as lizards are, and how sleep is indeed one of such special aspects of lizards that we don't know, and how I'm trying to study that. But before I get into what I do, I want to show you that a lot about sleep, even though it's such a common thing, is not known, especially how sleep occurs in the wild or in nature, right? And one of the reasons is that sleep isn't as appealing as active behaviors. People want to take photos of a tiger chasing a deer. People want to take photos of elephants foraging, but we're not really interested when they go to sleep. And this is true for even ecologists. A lot of our literature and research is on locomotion and like foraging, but we don't know a lot about sleep ecology, right? But most of the research is still on mammals and birds. We don't know much about reptile sleep. And till now, a lot of these studies have been in the labs only, where you can wire an animal with electrodes to study how their brain waves are and so on. But till now, it was not possible to do it in the wild, to record sleep with EMG or EEG or EOG, but now it is. And I'm also doing some of that stuff, and hopefully, maybe in a year, I'll be able to tell you what I found. Right. Until now, much of the questions are why we sleep, not when, how, where we sleep, and how these things affect how we survive and how we reproduce. Right. So what I work with is reptiles, and reptiles are highly diverse. There are more than 10,000 species globally. There are lizards, there are snakes, there are tortoises, there are crocodiles, and it's a really diverse group. And one of the reasons for working with reptiles and lizards in particular is that they're very easy to work on. They're generally quite common, easily. You can handle them easily if you need to. They do well in the labs. And it's just much easier than, let's say, trying to record sleep in tigers, right? So I can easily go and approach a lizard or observe it 10 meters away, but it is tough to do with other species. And lizards have this really uncanny ability to adapt to their habitat in very short periods of time, and it shows in their body. So here are some anoles from the Caribbean, and they have been shown to change their body shapes to match the environment that they're in. If there are a species living trunks, on tree trunks, that is broad surfaces, they have longer legs and they can run faster. But if they're on like really narrow things, as you can see on the bottom right, they're like twig anoles. They have really short legs and they can't really run that fast, but they have good grip and so on. They're more stable. So basically, what these groups do is they adapt to the environment really fast and over a few hundred generations. And you can, if their sleep sites are specialized, their morphology can also be specialized. So this is my interest in looking at this group, is that they're easy to handle, easy to work on in the labs and in the wild, and they really respond to the environment or changes in the environment. Right. But recently there was a review on sleep in reptiles and amphibians, and that shows that we barely know anything about sleep apart from a few species. So in reptiles, we only know of the 10,000 odd species, we only know sleep from like 23 species or something like that, which just shows that our understanding of this world, this natural world, is so incomplete, and which is a great thing, which gives us an opportunity for people like you as tourists or tourism managers or naturalists, students, or me as a researcher to go out in the world and discover this vast unknown, which excites me. I don't know about you. Right. So I'm going to give you two examples of the two studies that I've worked on so far on sleep ecology in lizards, and I'm going to then tell you about my plans for the future and so on. So let me take you to the first study, and this takes place in the Andaman Islands. As Subish told you, I worked around 6 years in these tropical islands. And if you are from mainland India, there is a lot of misconception. Sometimes people even ask, do you need a visa to go to the Andaman Islands? You don't. If you're an Indian citizen, it's very much part of India. It's the easternmost region of India, right? So Andaman Islands are tropical islands. We have a lot of rainfall, covered with evergreen forests. And in these evergreen forests, the most abundant creatures are reptiles, like vertebrates. And these two species, the short-crested Bay Island lizard and the short-tailed Bay Island lizard, they are quite abundant. I think they form around 45% of all lizards in terms of number. So what that means is that you can just see them, once you get into a forest, you can see them running around everywhere during the day. So they're in a lot in numbers, and it just makes them easier to study. So both of these lizards are endemic to the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. The short-crested Bay Island lizard is known from both Andaman and Nicobar, whereas the short-tailed one is a new species. It was only discovered 8 years ago by my colleague Hari Krishnan, who will be speaking to you maybe day after tomorrow, right? So the short-tailed Bay Island lizard is a new species, and the short-crested Bay Island lizard, these are only found in the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. So I observed them on trees during the day, on the left like this, on big tree trunks, and they display to their mates, to competitors, and it's very cool. A lot of these lizards, they signal by extending their dewlap. If you can see the loose skin on their neck, so they extended. Many of these dewlaps have colors, so these are all signals, right? How we talk, we WhatsApp, or we high five, we wave. They also can signal to their mates, potential mates, or their enemies by doing all these things. But at night, they never choose these tree trunks. They completely shift where they're active to where they sleep, and they're generally sleeping on this really thin plants, thin young plants like saplings and seedlings. And this was a natural history observation. This whole study that I'm going to talk to you about, it came from just an observation by Hari, who said, you know what, Nitya, I've never seen them sleep on tree trunks. Maybe we should look at it. And I was like, yes, I'm in Andaman Islands and I have this opportunity to do this. So let's do it. And yeah, so I'm just going to talk to you about this study, which is published a few years ago, titled "Watch Out Where You Sleep." So it's important to be careful where you're sleeping and how you're sleeping. So just to give you a peek into what the Andaman Islands look like, there are a few big islands, but there are many small islands. And we did this study on 3 islands in South Andaman, where Port Blair is, the capital. We did it on Rutland Island and on Little Andaman Island. Right. So these are where some of these islands are really beautiful, tropical, small, and you don't have to go to Thailand or Malaysia to see these beautiful islands. And the coral reef is beautiful. The marine life is great. But above the sea, the lizards are like, that's why we were there. Yeah, and these tropical islands have this great diversity of lizards, right? But we are focusing on these 2 lizards, and we are basically asking, where do these lizards sleep? So we didn't know, right? When we asked where, we recorded structural measures as well as thermoregulatory measures, as in how's the structure of where they're sleeping, how narrow, how wide, how high, and so on, what kind of substrate they're sleeping on, as well as what is the microclimate. So we record temperature, humidity, and so on. And the second question is, once the lizards are at these sites, how do they use these sleep perches? How are they orientated? Do they like horizontal perches? Do they like vertical perches? Or what is the head direction? And I'm going to explain why head direction is important. So we observed initially when we were planning the study that lizards sometimes, let's say when they're on a tree trunk, on a sapling trunk, like really narrow plant, they're on the trunk, they can either face down or up, right? And when they're on the branch, they can either face the trunk or away from the trunk. When they're on the leaf, they can face the stem of the leaf or to the tip of the leaf. So what we thought was important was, because this forests have a lot of snakes, and these snakes try to catch these lizards when they're sleeping, when they're vulnerable, right? So these lizards, they must have some tricks to be safe. And one of the tricks that we thought could be possible is to orient themselves towards the potential approach path of a snake. So if a snake is climbing the plant, if you're on a trunk, if you're facing the ground, you'll be able to see it better once you're away. If you're on the branch and you're facing again inwards towards the trunk, you'll be able to see it climbing, right? And so on. So this is what we collected. We collected this data for 501 lizards, 501 individuals of two species, so 386, the short crested one, and 185 individuals of the short tailed ones. The short crested ones are a bit more abundant, and it is reflected in how many lizards we caught and observed. All right, we did it across 8 sites in 3 islands, and we walked 53 trails. So this was done on 53 nights of observations, and each observation was around 2 to 4 hours each night of sampling. We didn't want to sample too long. It's not that we can't do any hard work, but we wanted to detect and we wanted to be at the best of our abilities and not get tired. It's been shown that after 4 hours of sampling at night for sleeping lizards, you generally stop detecting them, and we didn't want any bias in recording where these individuals were sleeping. So we would go out into this forest on these trails, and then we would scan everything from the ground, because initially we didn't know where they're sleeping. So we searched everything from the leaf litter to as high as our flashlights, our headlamps would allow us. That was typically around 4 meters or 12 feet, right? And we did this in forests, which were mostly lowland evergreen forests, which is around 30 meters to 650 meters above sea levels. So this is what it typically looked like. Two field assistants and I would go into this forest, walk these trails, and search everything very thoroughly. And when I say thoroughly, around walking for around 200 meters used to take us 2 hours, because we're searching every inch of the forest. And we would typically find lizards perched like this. So when we flash with the white light, obviously their eyes open, but they're completely inactive. It's very easy to catch them. During the day, you'll find it super tough to catch them. But at night, they're very inactive, and they're either on these branches or leaves and so on. So what did we find? We found that as compared to the day when they're perching on tree trunks, these guys are always on unstable and thin plants. So what does it mean? So these are seedlings and saplings, young plants that are very wobbly, very flimsy or unstable. And why might that be? And we think it is a really good strategy to avoid snakes or even rats climbing from the bottom of the plant to get to you. If you're on a big tree, you're never going to feel the vibration. But if you're on a really thin plant, you would feel it, and that gives you an early warning system, right? It gives you around a minute or half a minute till the snake gets to you. So it is their alarm, right? And then we found that what we're suspecting, that they also have more tricks up their sleeves, which is they're facing, most of these lizards are sleeping facing inwards, which means if they're on the trunk, they're facing the ground. If they're on the branch, they're facing the trunk. And if they're on the leaf, they're facing the stem. So this is where a snake is supposed to approach from when it is approaching from the ground, right? And what this means, I want you to take a moment to think how they do this. They essentially have to turn around. So they climb the plant and they turn around. And for a long time, I used to think nobody has recorded it. And then I was going through some natural history notes from the 1960s, and I found that somebody in the Caribbean actually noted this same exact behavior of lizards going on thin plants and turning around to sleep in Caribbean anoles, right? So we think it is not just this alarm system has just vibrations, but they also detect them visually, because a lot of things, even wind, can shake the plant on which you're sleeping, and you don't want to immediately escape and move at night, because that act of moving might actually give away your location. So we think this like a two-pronged strategy. You first feel it in the vibration on the thin, unstable plant you're sleeping on. Then when you awaken, you confirm that it's actually a predator, and then you run, right? And we also found that a lot of these lizards were actually coming back to sleep on the same plant over and over again, over many nights. And this is quite particular, very peculiar, this behavior of site fidelity. If you go on Google or Google Scholar and search site fidelity, you would find like pages and pages of literature showing that a lot of animals actually do the same thing. They use the same site over and over again. And we think that is because once a site is known to be safe, it's much better to go back there than explore and find that some other site is not safe, right? Right. And then also, as you would expect in any species, there's like variation obviously between body sizes. And so individuals which are bigger slept higher on higher perches. So we think that individuals that can make it, apart from sleeping on an unstable substrate, they should put as much distance as possible between the ground and them. That gives them more time to react when a predator approaches. Right. So this was the first study that we did in Andamans, and this got me thinking that if they have really such special, like really specialized requirements, right? Like of these 501 lizards, all of them slept on really thin, unstable plants, and this doesn't happen very often in nature, that everybody is conforming to the same strategy. That this is the plan they're sticking to. In nature, there is huge variation. And when we saw this, we were like, okay, they must have a really strong, force to be safe, that is forcing them to be safe, and that is predation, right? And we wanted to see if this specialized requirement of sleeping, how does that change when the habitat changes? We know not all areas in India or the world is nice, lush, evergreen forest or pristine landscape. A lot of it is modified. And for the next study, we moved to Agumbe in Karnataka, where we wanted to look at a similar species, closely related. It's Moneilosaurus ruxi, or the forest bloodsucker. The rux is forest lizard, and it has many names. It is a similar looking species, but a different genus completely, right? And again, during the day, it's on these big trunks, tree trunks, displaying, but at night, it's again back to using the same exact strategies as its distant relatives in Andamans do, just sleeping on thin, unstable perch plants. So we wanted to see what happens when you take away that forest. What happens when this forest is converted into areca nut plantation? Everybody loves to chew areca nut, and I don't know why. It's carcinogenic, you shouldn't. But this has led to a substantial conversion of landscape, especially in Western Ghats, and even in Andamans, but yeah, more so in Western Ghats. So we see a large strands of these just areca nut plantations. It's fairly homogeneous, you can see. It's even equally spaced, the plantation, and there is very little seedlings and saplings growing underneath, right? So we thought, now that they don't have the luxury of sleeping on a lot of seedlings and saplings, I'm not saying there are no seedlings and saplings, there are, but very, very less. The options are definitely fewer as compared to the forest. What happens to their sleep then? Right. So this work, we did it with a master student from Poland, Milena Bors. She led this work. I was only there in advisory capacity. So we did this work, again, following the same protocols, measuring the same things as we did with the Andaman lizards, right? And the results, this time we went a step forward and actually measured what is available to them to select from, and then we saw what they're selecting. So we have first measured what is available in the habitat, what kind of trees, what girth, is available and what they're selecting for. And if you see on the right, in the forest, the forest is the one in the bottom in B. They're again selecting a lot of branches and leaf, but mostly thin branches. But in the plantation, where the proportion in white, which is available, is the trunk. The number of trunks is huge because it's all areca nut plants. And if you've seen an areca nut plant, you would see that the foliage is only on top and it's just straight denuded trunks. But in these habitats, what they slept on, they also slept on a lot of alternative substrate, which is fallen branches and which anything like vines that give them that instability. And we saw that when we measured these substrate, we found that these are actually again very thin places or plants that they're sleeping on. 63 millimeters, which is like 6 centimeters, something like this, which is super thin that is sleeping on. And yeah, hold on, I seem to have, okay, I got it back, the control. And we also saw that lizards, when they're forced to sleep in plantation, they sleep on lower perches. And what this means is that there are less seedlings and saplings in plantation, and they're actually much shorter than they're in forest. So lizards, in their need to sleep on really thin, unstable plants to be safe from predators, are forced to sleep on lower perches. But their strategy to sleep doesn't change. If they cannot find a thin plant, they sleep on a fallen branch, which anything that allows them that instability to sleep. Right. And again, we found the majority of these lizards had the head facing in, right? And again, this strategy is so cool. So you just go to any end to keep yourself safe when you're sleeping. So this study, hopefully, it's in review now and should be published soon. Yeah, and then we can talk more about it. Right. So before we move on to other cool things that I haven't worked on, let me tell you, I'm just currently doing a big review on where, when, how lizards sleep and reptiles sleep all over the world and how that affects their life. I've seen this strategy of sleeping on thin, unstable plants repeated across, like you wouldn't believe, it's in vine snakes, it's in other lizards, in other geckos, diurnal geckos which sleep at night, and chameleons. And this is just a great strategy. And this strategy is also in monkeys and so on. So this gives you, just looking at sleep, it gives you a new appreciation of the patterns out there in the world, right? Right. And apart from where you sleep, there are many more consideration of not just where you sleep and how you sleep in that sleep site, your sleep posture. There's a consideration of when should you wake up. And in this case of a Madagascan diurnal gecko, it also sleeps on the the strategy is the same. It sleeps on thin plants. Only this time, all of the individuals sleep on terminal branches with the head facing out. And this is another strategy to escape, even though you don't have visual confirmation, you just escape as soon as you, it's easier to jump to the ground if you're at the end of the branch and you escape into the night. This study, very interestingly, the scientists recorded that this lizard is sleeping on these exposed sites, right? Even the lizards we looked at, they're all sleeping on exposed sites. And that is at night. And a lot of their predators, let's say bats, cannot detect you if you're immobile. And a lot of birds, nocturnal birds even, they hunt by movement, by seeing movement. So if you're immobile, even if you're exposed, you're pretty cool, you're safe. But when daylight arrives, you suddenly are exposed, right? So what do you do? When should you wake up? And in this gecko, they found that all these geckos leave, like I think half an hour to 45 minutes before sunrise, and slowly make their way, very slowly make their way to where they're active during the day. to their tree trunks, and so on. So this is a very important aspect: when you should go to sleep and when should you wake up, apart from how long you should sleep and so on. And this other question of what color should you be when sleeping, uh, and this seems like it's not important for lizards, but a lot of lizards have great colors, like chameleons. They can change their colors. Even a lot of Agama lizards that I talked to you about can change their color to a few shades, not as much as a chameleon. But what color should a chameleon be when they're sleeping? These are interesting questions which we still don't have an answer for. We think they should be drab colored, but it's not always the case. And so people are working on it at the moment. And should you be sleeping alone or should you be sleeping in groups? So in a house, we generally feel safer if you're not sleeping alone, right? Sleeping with family. Does this happen in lizards? Even lizards which are not known to be social. There are some lizards, like a lot of geckos, there are some kings who are known to be social. They're actually monogamous pairs. That is, there is a husband and a wife, and they do everything together. Even they sleep at the same time, at the same time together. But this also happens in lizards which are not known to be social. For example, the lizards I worked on in the Andamans, if you see the bottom left, these short-crested Bay Island lizards, during the day, we would never see them together, apart from if they're mating, if a male is chasing a female for mating, or like fighting. But at night, we found some of them, not all of them, very few of them, sleeping together on the same leaf. There is a female and a juvenile on the right, and there are two females sleeping on top of each other at night. And so that is a bit baffling, right? But we think it could be anti-predatory, another strategy to be safe. So if you're sleeping together, if one individual wakes up, it disturbs the other individual and both of you escape. So this is to show that we don't know a lot of things. But apart from just natural history, apart from, yes, we know where they sleep, when they sleep, how they sleep, it's very descriptive. And you're like scientists, like say physicists and the chemists, and even a lot of fundamental biologists may think, okay, so what? Yeah, you know these things, but what does that mean for the world, for the life overall? Well, it means that there are a few aspects that we haven't considered, but we should. One is, if you are, say, sleeping on a very specialized site, if you need to sleep on thin, unstable perches, like say this Bruckesia chameleon, these are leaf litter dwelling chameleons in Madagascar. During the day, they're in the leaf litter hunting. They're really tiny and very cute. But at night, they always, without fail, climb tiny perch plants to sleep. And this, as I said, the lizards, if a species uses some type of perch or substrate, they're generally good. They're quite adapted to that. So chameleons could have, some chameleons could have become more arboreal or moved upwards to plants. They can use plants, maybe because in the first place they slept on thin, unstable plants. They had the need to sleep on thin, unstable plants, and this led to their morphological specialization. And this, if you have more powers to use, or your body is more better suited to use more sort of habitats, you're going to use it, and your habitat diversifies, right? So let's just think of Spider-Man. A Spider-Man is a normal man before a spider bites him, and he cannot climb walls. But as soon as he can climb walls, he just climbs walls all the time. Right. So, and there is morphological specialization as well. And sleeping in groups, as I said, many lizards or reptiles, they're not social during the day, but they are at night. And this can lead to more interaction within your species, within members of your species. And this can give rise to sociality over evolutionary scales of time. But as I said, with the example of habitat modification, there are also a lot of other changes going on in the world. And I want to give you this a few examples of applied sleep ecology, when this information, this natural history information about where, when, and how they sleep is actually useful in conservation. So there is this velvet gecko. It's a nocturnal gecko. It sleeps during the day. This is called a velvet gecko, and this is found in Australia. And these geckos have a very particular requirement. They sleep under rocks, and generally only rocks which are on another rock. And this is to do with the thermal profile, as in the temperature that these rocks can provide to them indirectly after being heated in the daylight, in the sun. And they only like narrow crevices. They're also very picky, like the lizards we saw, as to where they sleep. And people, tourism, and sometimes your ornamental trade, people have moved rocks to take rocks from the natural habitat and put in their gardens, or just move rocks when they go. You might have seen, when you go on some treks, you would have seen people piling rocks on top of each other. That's a stupid thing to do. Don't do that because you're disturbing the home. To you, it's a tiny rock. For a lizard, it can be its home where it sleeps. And because they have really narrow requirements, very specialized requirements for where they sleep, disturbing these rocks has led to these geckos and the snakes that also sleep like this and depend on these geckos to dramatically decline in population. And so in Australia, they're doing this restoration where they put rocks which are exactly the shape and size as the lizards like back in their habitat, so that the habitat is restored. So this is an example of successful restoration when just based on the understanding of where and how they sleep. There is urbanization, as I said, and artificial light at night, known as ALAN. Scientists just love to give acronyms to everything to sound cooler. I work on ALAN. So any case, so yeah, artificial light at night can disturb lizards, and currently we're working on this Sammophilus lizards, rock-dwelling lizard, the Indian rock Agama. They're in rocky habitats, but they are also in Bangalore in these abandoned plots on the walls during the day. And we're currently working to find if we can understand if urbanization affects their sleep patterns and so on. And with invasion, invasion happens when, as I said, an invasive population is created when a population or species is created, taken from its natural range away to another place beyond its natural range by humans, right? And so this is an example of a cat snake, a cat snake in Guam, the brown cat snake, Boiga irregularis. So this species was introduced to Guam Islands in the Pacific, and there it has eaten a lot of birds to extinction. And this, and they have now found a way to manage this because they found out where the snake sleeps and where the birds that it eats sleeps, so that they can protect it with fences and so on. So pretty crazy stuff. And if you want to ever maintain animal populations, let's say in zoos and so on, a big requirement to know, a very special requirement is to know where they sleep. What kind of, you cannot give a Andaman, like the Bay Island lizard, a rock to sleep on, or you cannot give an Indian rock Agama a plant, a tree to sleep on. You know, they have very specific requirements which can affect their stress profiles, their how long they survive, and so on. So these are very important things to know. Right. So ultimately, with my research, what I am currently doing is collecting this data on where they sleep, how they sleep, when they sleep, across many reptiles and many lizards, particularly, especially in the Indian subcontinent. Then I want to know what happens to these sleep traits, if you will, like when, how they sleep, when habitat changes, when they have optimal, as in what they like, to suboptimal perches, And I want to know not just if they escape, I want to know how they escape. There is a big body of literature looking at exactly the science of how lizards escape and how animals escape, how far they react to a predator from, and so on. And we want to do that for lizards for sleep. We want to see how thermoregulation, this need to be warm enough, uh, interacts with a need to be safe enough. So these are these sort of constraints which come very easily to us. We can switch on the AC if it is too hot. We can close the door to be safe. Animals have find their ideal scenarios, their ideal sleeping conditions in the wild, and the wild is a scary place for a lizard or other reptiles. There are a lot of things out there to get you to kill you. On top of that, you cannot control your own body temperature. It's ridiculous, right? And ultimately, I want to understand how sleep changes with a changing world. There is urbanization, there is, say, fragmentation, there is biological invasions, climate change. A lot of these things are going on, and how that affects sleep. Uh, so yeah, that is me. I would like to, before I end, I would like to thank all these people, all the information that I gave you just now. It's not just me finding all of these things out by myself. It's done with institutional support from Indian Institute of Science. They have really great collaborators, Hari, Karthik, Milena, Gauri, and Maria. All of these people work with me, and they have all contributed to whatever I told you. So yeah, thank you so much, and thanks for listening. I'd be happy to take any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Nitya. Thank you for this wonderful session. But I was wondering, what about the aerial predator? Because they are sleeping on the branches, whether there is any invasion from the aerial predator?
Yeah, like as I said, like bats
Yeah.
are one, but if you don't move, it's tough for bats to echolocate and find you. Uh, and again, with nocturnal, let's say, owls and so on, it seems that even if they're exposed, they are quite safe to an extent. So I think it all depends as to what are you more afraid of. Like, are you afraid of snakes more? Are there more snakes which are always out to get you, or there are a few birds? So it depends. I think with the landscape, the predator or the ecosystem, the composition of predators changes, right? In some ecosystems, there are more aerial predators. In some, there are more ground-dwelling predators. So yeah, I think that determines to an extent what is the best site for you to sleep. So in Andamans, we haven't seen lizards being picked up at night, sleeping by owls or anything. It's very tough to observe. Obviously, you have to be awake every night, and this requires a lot of sampling. But we have seen snakes trying to get lizards when they're sleeping. Um, so yeah, and very interestingly, not in Andamans but in other places, snakes also, because they need to eat, right? They also have the strategy to beat this strategy of the lizards. They try to approach from a nearby plant so that the plant doesn't shake, and they get the lizard sometimes, and not all the time. But yeah, nature is a really wonderful place, something to explore.
Okay, cool. I was also wondering, how come the distribution of lizard happened in Andaman Nicobar Island? Because so many islands are there, they're not connected. These islands are not connected, but the distribution seems to be really high. The variety of lizards, everything. Whether they will be able to move through the sea, or how come that happened?
Right. So obviously, okay. So there is sea level fluctuation over millennia, and so there is the ice age happens, right? So 12,000 years ago, when the last ice age happened, all the water in the sea retreated to the polar regions and in form of ice caps. So what that led was reduction of sea, and that this fluctuation of sea level and reduction of sea level ensures that a lot of land which is not connected at present in 2020 was actually connected before. So a lot of islands that we know of, a lot of continental islands, they're actually submerged hill ranges, and we can only see the top of the hills. And but these are actually connected. So Andamans are most likely continental. They had connection with Burma, Myanmar, and that submerged mountain range, and a lot of the colonization to Andaman at least seems to be like that. But to oceanic islands, if you say probably Nicobar or the islands out in the Pacific, which have never had any connection to mainland, their reptiles can also colonize based on things called flotsam. So if there is a massive cyclone like Amphan, or so in these things, a lot of trees gets washed away into the sea, and there are like sea currents. They take them, carry them to different places, and a lot of these lizards and like snakes are very sturdy. They can actually survive harsh conditions. Some of them, not all of them. And so they can, many times this has been documented that when this floating trees reaches an island, a lizard or a snake, or sometimes even frogs reach with them. And that's how colonization happens. And you may think, well, I have never seen a tree floating with snakes on it. But this happens over so many thousand years that it's a matter of probability when a lizard would be successful to establish a new population.
So there is a question from Christy. Can we say that lizard sleeping pattern is same like humans? So how long they sleep? That's
right. Right. Yeah. So one say that because the sleep duration, let's say sleep duration, this is not very well known. As I said, to actually characterize sleep, you also need brain recordings to see it is actually sleeping, or eye movements or muscle tone, these sort of recordings. And till now, it was very difficult to do on reptiles. But from the literature that we know of, it can vary quite a bit. So many lizards sleep like 12 hours. Many also sleep in the afternoon a bit more, even if they sleep at night if it's too hot and so on. And in just this sleep, they have like many states. I told you, right? So there is like slow wave sleep, and they switch to REM sleep. They go back to slow wave sleep, and a lot of these changes. So yes, they sleep for sure. But how, like, what are the sleep states? We are still exploring. And this research is very recent. You would think people would have done it long time ago, but with the advent of technology, these things are being possible. We ourselves are trying to record sleep with these small loggers that we have now in the wild. So we can actually see, not in the labs, but in the wild, to see how long a lizard sleeps, in which state a lizard is in, and so on. So yeah, they do sleep. They sleep. Their sleep is controlled by the light-dark cycle. The diurnal species generally sleep at night, and the nocturnal species sleep during the day. But there are some species which are both diurnal and nocturnal. They can get like awake at any time. They can be active at any time, sleep at any time. And there is a thing called micro sleep in a lot of species. If you just look at the rock pigeon, right, your feral pigeon that you see, Columba livia, it's everywhere, right? A very interesting thing about pigeons is that they have this micro sleeps. They have this really small bouts of sleep, so 1,000 such bouts in the day. Even if they seem to be active, they're not. They're going back and forth into sleep many times. So these things you can only know when you're actually recording the brain and seeing what's exactly going on in the brain.
So you mentioned that. Sorry, Subish.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. So you mentioned about that device, the logger you're going to use to observe, right? So what are you going to measure it with that?
So as I said, we want to measure the electromyogram, which is the muscle tone. We'll try to measure the electroencephalogram, that is brain waves, and we try to measure electrooculogram, which is eye movement. Eye movement is actually quite a good indicator of sleep in reptiles. It's not as much in other species, but yeah, in reptiles it's a good indicator. With this device, it's very newly made. It's just was made last year by French scientists who we collaborate with, and you can also record like ambient temperature. You can measure heart rate. You can measure a bunch of things, and you can also measure movement. So if the lizard moves, we also have to know that. So it records if it is climbing or if it is moving horizontally. We also get to know all these things. And this device is just this tiny, just like a SIM card, just bigger than a SIM card, and just 2 grams in weight.
Okay. So which, yeah.
No, actually, I heard that even the deer, they used to sleep only for a few seconds. It's like they will be blinking for just 1 or 2 seconds. That's all. The deer population. Hello?
The deer.
Yeah, they hardly sleep for a few seconds. That's all.
Yeah, you said deer. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it happens. We
Yeah, Nitya, go ahead.
Please. Nitya, please.
Yeah, I was just saying that it happens, but we don't have a lot of knowledge on how sleep, like especially the recordings of brain in the wild. So yeah, sometimes it appears that they're not sleeping or sleeping, but it can be a bit different.
Definitely, they won't be having the luxurious like we do.
Exactly. Okay, with deer, with herbivores, their constraint is that they have to feed very often to maintain their bodies. The way the metabolism is, they have to feed quite often. They cannot have one big meal and go to sleep. So in herbivores, it's been shown that they sleep generally less than carnivores and so on. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's true.
And
recently, like 2-3 years ago, they found that elephants actually sleep, and it's related to body size as well. So they found that elephants probably sleep only 2 hours a day overall. Yeah.
Good information.
Yeah, I don't want to be an elephant. I want to sleep 8 hours. I want my quota of 8 hours of sleep. I don't compromise with that.
So the next question is, so what do you think of snakes growing in home? And if you feel good about it, then what kind of snakes do you prefer to keep as a pet? I'm really fond of snakes.
So what do you think of snakes going into homes?
No,
And
they want to keep it as a pet, and I'm really fond of snakes.
Okay. 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 So I personally don't like to keep any wild animal as a pet. I love them, but yeah. So what happens with the pet trade? There is actually a systematic trade, multi-billion-dollar industry that collects, trades, and supplies pets. So it includes everything from the person who's collecting the pet to the person who's selling you the pet, right? So there are many problems associated with the pet trade. I'm not trying to discourage you by saying you shouldn't love animals, but I'm saying even if you love them, it's better if you observe them and read about them in nature and not keep them. What the problem with pet trade is, generally it's very systematic. It leads to over harvesting of the population. A lot of species are endangered because people keep them as pets, because they're so cute or because they're so cool. People want to take them away from the wild and keep them in captivity, and that leads to reduction in population. The second problem is that many times it leads to invasive species that a species from India is traded as a pet in the US, and sometimes they get released if the owner releases them and so on, and they are now an invasive population in that place. In India, if you see, a lot of tortoises are kept as pets and released. People think it's a good thing to release them. You're doing a humanitarian thing, but it's not. It's more often going to die outside, or sometimes if it survives, it becomes an invasive species. And third thing is that it can like lead to spread of diseases and so on, zoonotic diseases which can spread to humans and such things. So not just snakes. Snakes is trade in snake is a big thing, and there are like amphibians. I worked on like amphibian pet trade a bit, and there are a lot of species being traded. So even if you're taking it out from next to your house, it is still taking out an individual from the wild. So I personally would recommend and request you not to keep it as a pet at home. A lot of I know quite a few people who do keep them, but in my point of view, this is not a good thing to do for the reasons I just told you.
So I like to add one more point to that. It's like keeping as a Indian pets, Indian snakes are it's illegal. And one more thing is like government has recently announced to give the list of exotic animals which is coming under the sites appendix 1, 2, and 3, where they have to give the list of animals who were having it, and they have to give it to the wildlife warden within 6 months. So after COVID, government is taking some initiative to control the trade.
Right. Yeah, no, it's very, very important. And for people who don't know, there is a convention in international trade of endangered species. It's called CITES, what Ratish was just mentioning. And apart from this, which shows that a lot of species are actually endangered because they're traded. So you might take out one individual, but there are 1,000 individuals like you who want to take out one. And as I showed you, like these guys or these animals they have really specific requirements. They get disturbed very easily, and they're very fragile. Even the population, they can crash quite rapidly. Many of them are not found many places in the world. So yeah. So even if you're well intentioned and you like snakes, you want to know more about them, this can actually harm them, So, yeah.
So in you mentioned like in zoo where they keep the sleep will affect, right? How the habitats will be there. Are they taking any research inputs for building their enclosures?
Right. No, I actually haven't looked at that in India per se. So I know of examples elsewhere that this is kept in mind, but yeah, I have no clue if this is actually followed in many Indian zoos, especially with reptiles. No, like good point. I actually should look into it. I have some colleagues who work on like captive care, ex-situ conservation. So yeah, this is actually a good point. Thank you, Ratish.
But in zoo, we don't have that predator issue, right? So they can evolve their pattern. In zoo, they don't have the predation.
No, that is true. But as I showed you, this kind of response, this sort of behavior is very innate. It seems to be hardwired into them, that everybody does the same thing. And that's what we're trying to look at. How does that change when their habitat is modified? And it seems they try and keep finding the same thing. So even though they don't have predators there, they have this like sort of innate response of behavior to be wary of predators. And that can lead to stress. And if you have like stress, your survival, like your longevity can go down. You're more prone to diseases, and ultimately it's not good. If they're trying to do captive breeding, your reproduction, like your output can go down because you're stressed. You're not at home. Yeah.
So one more question is there. You can educate them easily. Like, how do you prevent lizards from coming home?
Yeah, you can't. You can't because much of our, like a lot of our homes are in their homes. Like it's not, they're not coming into your homes. You are there already and that where they live. But apart from that philosophical point, it's you shouldn't like if there is a lizard in my home and typically they're like house geckos, I don't mind because I know about them and I'm not scared of them, right? A lot of the time people, they face a lot of dangers. They're happy to face bullets, but they're scared of, say, gecko. This is a very common fear, and we think they're like venomous, they can bite us and we'll die, but it's not like that. And they are actually doing a great service. I keep telling my mother, who was initially scared of geckos, like house geckos, hemidactyl, and I was like, look at this, like this gecko is eating your cockroaches. I even showed her, I took photos whenever I observed it. I showed her, see, you have one less cockroach because you have a gecko in your house. And in my house, like there are lots of wall, like lots of geckos come because they're like lights and lots of insects come there. But yeah, so you shouldn't be scared, even if like a garden lizard comes into your house or a skink. Uh, you should just try and show it the way out. If you don't want it inside, don't kill it. Just sweep it away or open the door and guide it away. That's the best way. Your home is your home, and I'm not ready to tell you that you should keep lizards in your house. Let them come and go. But yeah, if you're afraid of them, you can just guide them away. Don't try to kill them, please.
And one more myth you can bust actually. You can see that in so many films where the lizard will fall on the food and then automatically the person dies and all those kind of things.
Yeah, that you would see this news coming from a lot of midday meal programs. You would see that the 10 students are sick after eating a dal in which a gecko fell. And so these are always excuses. They, the food itself, we all know a lot of midday meal that is supplied to schools is of very poor quality, and when it leads to people getting sick, then people blame it on gecko fail. It's not our fault. But not to say that there can't be bacterial infections from geckos. So there can be, I think you can also get salmonella sometimes, which is easily treatable. But yeah, you can get like a bit of loose motion if you lick a gecko, maybe.
Okay, I think yeah. Any more questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
So which organism sleeps the most and which organism sleeps the less? So
Which
that is my
organisms
question.
sleep more and which organisms
Yeah.
sleep less? Right. There are some global comparisons which show that if you have a smaller body, which means your metabolism is generally higher, you need to feed a lot. Very often, you sleep less. And herbivores generally tend to, relatively to carnivores, tend to sleep less. Uh, if you are an organism that sleeps on the more exposed areas, sometimes your sleep will go down. So if there are like more predators, more predation risk, your sleep will go down. Like it can happen to you as a species overall as compared to other species, but also within species. There are many studies which show that when, let's say, a species of ducks or sparrows, when they're exposed to a model of a snake, their sleep that night goes completely like it's really reduced. So yeah, if you are a smaller bodied animal or if you're a herbivore, or if you sleep in places which are more exposed, your sleep is supposed to go down. Otherwise, it should go up. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Good. But this is only known for mammals and birds. We don't know if how this happens in reptiles. As I said, that the review only found like 23 species with any recordings of their sleep. So it's still early days. We are still figuring a lot out about lizards and reptiles and how they sleep. And from like my research, I'm trying to focus on the ecological side of things. Some researchers are working on the evolutionary side of things as to how sleep rates of reptiles gave rise to sleep in birds and mammals. And yeah, so researchers have been working on different things.
Big topic.
Yeah, it's a good topic. It's a big topic.
So, any more questions? Some of them are joining just now.
Yes.
They might have thought like 7 o'clock, I think.
So
That's
yesterday we had
Right.
7 o'clock, and today it's like 6 o'clock.
Yeah.
It will be like more like 6:30.
From now on, it will be on 6 o'clock, right? Okay. So I think no more questions, I feel. Yeah, good. Thank you.
Can I just say, thank you. No, can I just say a few words before we sleep, before we end? So, a lot of sleeping, eh? So I just wanted to say that the whole point of talking about sleep and lizards to you who are like into tourism, ecotourism, is to just say that there are many small things which we don't think are important in this world, but they are. And there are many small species or species we don't know about, our common lizards, or like tiny lizards who we'd rather not see but see a tiger, that are so cool and have such special lives and like really cool strategies to be safe during sleep and warm during sleep that we don't know about. And these are only few strategies we talked about. There are many more that we are exploring at the moment. So the whole point is you should definitely see tigers and think of that as tourism, but also looking at your natural, your native, like geckos, your frogs, your snakes, your birds. This is also tourism, and this is the cooler tourism, I would say. Even insects and butterflies. A lot of people just go to tiger reserves to take tiger photos. You'll be doing something different and something in which you would actually know the natural world and not just put it on Instagram for.
Yeah.
Actually, you just, now I got reminded of asking you something now. We do have a herping too. Every evening we used to take the girls for a herping too. I wish to know whether the light, because we are not using the harsh light, but we are using a dim light, but whether that disturbs the sleeping ecology of
Yeah.
or a
Yeah, it does. It does. Even we didn't know it very well. So initially, when we actually did our studies, we used this white light, but it's not good for them. They wake up very easily. They get disturbed. So you should either get red lights or you should put a red filter. It's very easy. You get these wrappers, this red plastic things or red thin cloth you can put on your light. That would solve your problem. So they won't get disturbed. You can observe them when they're sleeping naturally. And if you're doing the same walk every night, you won't disturb that population for all.
So if I'm not wrong, so evening helping will be good. Maybe from 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock or 8:30 will be good, rather than taking the helping to midnight, right? Because we won't be disturbing them.
So it's not about. It's fine. Like if you're just talking about lizards that sleep at night, it's fine. Like if you have a red light and if you maybe not take the same trail every day. There may be diversified to say 3 trails, alternate. It should be fine. Yeah, if you're doing it at 7, it's good. Still be night. It'll still be early in the night. But yeah, obviously don't try to like disturb them. I'm sure everybody knows that. And hopping is obviously good on, let's say, if you're looking for frogs, it's good on rainy nights. It may not be, you may not be able to see a lot of these lizards sleeping on rainy nights. But yeah, you should be in Tekadi, you should be able to see some Calotis or Monulosaurus species sleeping around your property or around that place. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you, man.
We looked at, I think.
Yeah, no, obviously. And please send me photos if you find them. I'd be very happy to look at them.
Yeah,
You can put a red filter on your flash.
Yeah, that's what is
Sure.
next question is. So you even to take photographs, we need to put that red filter on the flashes.
Or you just don't take it with a flash. Just put your red light on the lid and take it with like normally. So it should be enough light to click it. Yeah, they get disturbed with white light.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because anyway, we want to educate the tourists also. This is
Exactly.
like how to balance it. Because like I mentioned,
Exactly.
if we can avoid like every 3 days, if we can go to the trial, then we can
Yeah.
less disturbance.
Yeah, don't disturb, don't chop, don't cut things on the trail if you don't need to, and things like that. Like many people in Andamans, I've seen people want to clear a path, they just chop indiscriminately, just create a trail which is already used, or just with as little disturbance as possible. Obviously, you would be the best judge of that. Yeah. But yeah, I look forward to if you, even if you can click it with a phone, I would be very keen to see other lizards sleeping. As I said, we don't know a lot about where they sleep, and it's all good information.
Sure, man.
So I think, we don't have any more questions, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you, Nitya. It was a wonderful session because we learned a lot. As you mentioned that changing the forest into Arachnid plantation itself impacted a lot on the lizards. And as you mentioned now, where the trail itself do not cut small branches also now. So we are going to be more careful now not to cut any branches or anything so that the lizard will sleep peacefully. And thanks a lot for your session.
It's a great
No, thanks so much.
seriously.
Great information. Yeah.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for having me.
Awesome.